School District Board of Trustees to order. Please let the record show that this meeting has been duly called and the notice of this meeting has been duly posted for time and manner required by law. Please let the record show that we also have 5 trustees in attendance at the opening of this meeting. First item on our agenda would be our academic review workshop.
Yes, sir. Mr. President and trustees, I'm pleased to bring Dr. Greg Gibson back today to work with us to go over our academic performance as a district. Now, we're only looking at our best projections, and he'll talk a lot more about that in terms of, we know the state has not yet released ratings, but we're going to give you the best information we have as of now. And we also have an interactive portion. So I appreciate you being here today, Dr. Gibson.
And thank you, Dr. Hollingsworth. And Mr. President, since we have, I think, one new trustee, and is the other one present, right?
Mr. Pitts is present, and Mr. Cooper will be here in a few minutes.
Okay. So I'm going to give a real quick summary of kind of how we got to where we are now. And Mr. Pitts and Mr. Cooper, it's not going to make a ton of sense. Don't worry about it, but you've got to hear this stuff for the first time at some point. So tonight is that first time. The information that's in the PowerPoint is nothing new to the rest of the trustees, but you've not seen it in this format. And I want to stop at a couple of places. And the reason to do this way before we dig into the work and dig into the data is, if we're really going to live the mantra that we're value-driven and data-informed, we hear a lot about being data-informed, and I like data. I mean, those that know me know that I probably love data, but we're value-driven, and we just need to be data-informed. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the value part of it before we get into the data part of it. And then we do have an interactive. I hope it's okay, Mr. President. We're actually going to get you off the desk and down here around tables, and we're going to just dig into some of the information and get some good feedback from you. Are they telling me that that's better now? Okay. I mean, I can keep leaning over if you want me to, but it's a lot of what we're working on tonight is systems perspective, and just in way of just review for many of you, we're going back to Dr. Deming and just this concept of a systems approach. And Dr. Deming, the previous slide, it's not enough to just work hard. We need to know what we're trying to accomplish and work hard. And so then we start having a system. He went on to say that in the absence of a system, that we have a tendency as organizations, and I've worked in many organizations, and I know, in fact, I'm working for a company now that they're consultants that are teaching systems perspective, and about every other staff meeting I have to say, are we just teaching this to other people, or are we actually trying to do it ourselves? Because I see us not looking at it like a system, and what happens if you look over to the right, if we don't think about the system, we just start blaming people, because we don't know about what else to blame. So it must be a person's fault. Dr. Deming had this published numerous times that about 85% of the deficiencies in organizations are system failures. But in the absence of understanding the system, we have a tendency to blame people 100% of the time. So we're trying to kind of undo that way of thinking. You all are well aware of this. Your scorecard aligns to this approach. You think about this, I believe you all call them priorities, but we're 4 big buckets, for lack of a better term: student, staff, stakeholder, and stewardship is actually how I just remember them, because those are the 4: student, staff, stakeholder, stewardship. The 4 S's and we believe that work should be designed around those 4 outcomes. This is kind of anchoring back, and Mr. Pitts, I promise you this will be the last time I'm going to say, but for new trustees, you're going to hear terms like governance and trustee, and what's the difference between a trustee and a representative, and what's team trust and things like that. So I'm going to do a little bit of a rewind for the 4 trustees, kind of how we got to where we were or where we are now, and then Mr. Pitts we'll call it level set as of tonight, and we'll just move forward from here. But Trustees, you might recollect that at least once, I think twice, you've taken a good governance inventory where we have self-assessed where we stand with respect to belief, mission, and vision, systems and processes, progress and accountability, advocacy and engagement, synergy and teamwork, and financial stewardship. Those results this board has worked on in between our different assessments to model a continuous improvement mindset that the district administration is utilizing in the scorecard. So if you want to kind of helicopter up and really think about performance of the district, we believe strongly that it collapses comfortably into three big buckets. And the first one is the mindset. The second one is the framework, and we're going to, at the very end, and Dr. Hollingsworth, please help me remember, we need about 5 minutes at the very end of this before y'all transition to the budget to talk about that systems framework. And just in the interest of time, every time we hit something on that, I'm going to skip and say it'll be the last 5 minutes. Okay. And so that's the framework, and then the execution tool. So when we talk about the scorecard, sometimes people, and you've got copies of the scorecard out here when we get down here in a little bit, but you know, they just say, well, this is it. You know, like this is the whole thing. And it's kind of true, but it's really, this is the execution tool. If you do this and you're not in the correct mindset, then this is going to fail. I'll just say it that way. If you have the right mindset, but you don't have a tool to execute, you've just got a good mindset. We're not actually getting anything done. So you have to have all three of these. So we're going to drill into mindset for just a little bit. I don't remember, was it 3 years ago maybe, the first time we took the team trust? We weren't in this room. It was over...
It was about 2.5 years ago.
Maybe two and a half years ago. And for the sake of anyone that's watching or in the room tonight, I just want to, you know, just go back to that moment in time, because before this was launched, this board was taking time to say, okay, wait a minute. Do we trust each other? And I'm going to go on. Do we trust in our ability? Do we trust in our believability? Are we connected? Are we dependable? And no one ever aces the team trust self-analysis. We take it at Moat Casey now, and we find little spots that we need to work on due to various things. But I do remember that we had a great conversation, and we got a good comfort level with the team trust on the board before we launched the scorecard. And I always stand ready at any time that you want to take another team trust self-assessment. So then we're going, the next part of the mindset is just a quick reminder that this will, the dais with the 7 board members and the superintendent represent the strategic role. Now I would argue that anybody that is lucky enough to get to sit right here, right off of the dais and there, like there's times that they're supporting, like they're, tonight is a good example with your budget, like they're here, you know, to really support the strategic role. They're still tactical team members, but they're a strong resource to the strategic role, if that makes sense. And so we believe that there are 3 types or 3 essential roles in organizations: the strategic role, you guys, trustees and superintendent, and then the tactical role that we'll get into a little bit, that's basically everybody right here. And so we're trying to build a cadence of accountability and responsibility between the strategic and the tactical roles. Good to meet you, Mr. Cooper. I'm Greg Gibson. I'm nobody. I used to be somebody. I'm going to pause for just a second. As we're moving around the state right now talking about the strategic role, this keeps coming up. And so, Mr. President and trustees, I wanted to stop here for just a little bit. And it's the definition of a trustee versus the definition of a delegate or a representative. And this is all in law and all of that, but I mean, you'd have to read a bunch of books, and I've tried to just summarize it here for you in a few bullet points. So a representative, and let's just think about your House member, Texas House or United States Congress. They are truly elected by the public. You see the first bullet, and then they are a representative. So it's very common in Western democracies. The delegates are elected to go to a meeting or series of meetings and express the will of their constituents. And you'll hear the Speaker of the House, before he hits the gavel, he'll say, members, vote your district. I don't know that they do that in the Senate, truthfully. I mean, I know they don't say that, and I don't think they do it. It's why they don't say it. But in the House, Speaker Phelan and Speaker Strauss might have been the first one that started that, but he would say, members, vote your district. Pop, and he would hit the gavel, and he was doing that third bullet, like you're supposed to vote what your district constituents say. The representative form of democracy has limited autonomy and independent thought. You're supposed to vote your district. They're just the voice of those not present. Now, this is where I'm seeing, and this is not Waxahachie, Dr. Hollingsworth, but I'm seeing all over the state trustees getting elected and thinking that they're a representative, but they're not, they're a trustee. And the only thing that's the same, by my estimation, is that both of these are elected by the public. But if you notice, everything else after that is different. And I'm going to summarize those 4 bullets and not just read them to you. But it's you trustees you are privy to information that the general public is not privy to by design. You'll go into executive session, you know things that the general public does not know. You are elected to be a good thinker and a good decision maker, not to represent constituents. Is that fair enough? I mean, we're pausing now and not, like usually we just kind of blow right past this, and we have a lot of new trustees all over the state coming on, and they're like, wait a minute, no one, and truthfully, I don't know why this isn't like at the TASB conference, or I don't know why this isn't said more, but it's just, so anyway, I'm just pausing here for a second. And I'm going to tell you all, when I got elected to the TRS board, and I know I've told you all about that as a superintendent, and then I'm on the board of directors for the teacher retirement system. I viewed myself when I rolled in there as a representative. It was not good, just telling you. And comments like, you have great ideas, Dr. Gibson, but I would never vote for you just if it was your idea. I would never vote for it because I kind of rolled in hot, I'll just tell you. Because I felt like I had to represent the superintendents, and then the superintendents that had supported me in that effort, I went back to them and they said, oh, you can't do that. We just want you to be a good decision maker. Okay, it would have been nice to know that when I rolled in, You see, they wanted me just to be a good thinker and a good decision maker because I was a trustee, not a representative. All right, I don't want to beat that around, and Mr. President, I saw you nod your head a little bit, so you're in agreement with this definition?
That was one of the very first things I learned at TASB.
Very good, because we're just seeing that this is just not being talked about enough, so that's why I wanted to park here for just a little bit. It's a completely different way to look at it. All right, so that's the strategic role. I'm not going to read to you, but the tactical role are your administrative team members. I think it's really important on the strategic role, you're looking out 3 to 5 years, and then your tactical team is keeping that 3 to 5 year focus, and they're thinking, what does this look like for 1 to 2 years? The strategic role works on the system. The tactical team moves between working on the system, in the system, if that makes sense. They've got to go work in the system. Tonight is kind of our on the system night. And then we go to the operational role, which is frontline staff. They work in the system 100% of the time. I think for the 5 of you, I've told you before, when I first started, or 4 of you, when I first started, I wanted teachers to love me as a superintendent, and by the end, I just didn't want them to roll their eyes when they heard my name. Like that was good enough, or just get this sick look on their face when they heard my name. So, but they're in the system, and my point with that is, like, everybody needs strategy, but no one in the system is going to come up and say, hey, can I give you some pointers, like a teacher, can I give you some pointers on priority 4, what I think we should do on 4.2? Like, it's just not going to happen. So we have to think strategically on the behalf of those that are delivering our services at the front line. I guess that made a good point. Somebody's. All right, this is the last slide I'm really going to focus on because this really tees up tonight, and I'm just going to click to a couple of conclusion slides. But going back to Deming, and I don't think I've shown this to the tactical team yet, maybe a few of them, but so tonight we're kind of looking at it together. But Dr. Deming first articulated, and it was actually called Plan Do Study Act, PDSA, and then he later changed it to check or recommended that be considered. I like check because study sounds like stuck. You know, like we're just going to study this. Check is we're just checking in real quick. We're going to glance at the data and see how we're doing. If you think back to the strategic role and the tactical role a while ago, the doing and the acting is 100% just the tactical and operational teams. Like they do all the doing and they do all of the acting. What we are recommending and what we're going to do tonight with this exercise is, I mean, one way to say it is we're checking on the data, and then we're taking feedback from the strategic role on the planning part. Tonight's the night. Like so the tactical teams, like we're pulling back the curtain. We're gonna let the strategic role in for a little bit. We need some feedback. You have a comment, Ted?
Yeah, I just want to point out to the board, this is something, honestly, that we have been missing. This is something that we have not done, not since I've been here. It's been something that when we've gone to SLI and some other events that we've had some conversation about, hey, we need more of an opportunity to be able to weigh in on some of that strategic planning that's going on, and that's what this is tonight. So I'm really excited about this. This is a great opportunity for that.
While your mic is hot and you're leaning forward, talk about BOY, MOY, EOY. I mean,
Yeah,
especially MOY while you're thinking.
Yeah, so one of the things that we're planning right now is to do something very similar to this middle of year. So this is going to be our beginning of year check-in with trustees on that overall strategic role that you have. And we want to come back in about February is the conversation we had, Dr. Averett, I believe, to come back in February, and we'll look at our middle of year data to see, okay, where are we? You know, based upon, we set some targets back at the beginning of the year. Let's see how we're doing. And that's looking at that lead data. Lead measures is what, you know, is often referred to versus lagging data. Because lagging data it's in the books. It's like an autopsy. You know, you can't fix it. It just tells you where we're at. Does that make sense? So we'll come back in mid-year and look again.
And the mother of all autopsies is a taper report, and they're very important, but this kind of shifts the paradigm from that once a year statutorily required look back. We have to do those, so we're not going to not do those. But I could, in my opinion, whoever over here is thinking about the taper report, that February, middle of the year, that might be a good time to do the taper. I think that's about the time that you have, I think that's within the statutory window. So just do it, like take the look all the way back. Now let's talk about where we are today, you know, and let's talk about okay, trustees, does that make sense that we're trying to get the data that you're hearing more real time and not just, you know, this look in the rearview mirror a few years back? Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Gibson, yeah. So we're going to look at the table report mid-year, and is that what you're saying?
You're required, I think it's a January, February timeframe, isn't it?
Usually comes in December. We have 9 days from that part. Going to
Thank you. So
a
like,
little off the last couple of years, but
Well, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit, because they keep changing the rules and getting sued, and then they can't crunch the numbers to get the numbers to us, and they're under a temporary restraining order right now, so I don't know when you'll get this year's
That's
taper.
been postponed to September 16th.
Okay, the TRO has?
Yes.
Right, but I don't know how, whatever time, is there another TRO that's going to happen? And then, but we think we're going to get a taper report sometime in December, even though there are a lot of all these wiggly moving parts. But, so that February timeframe would potentially hit in that 90 days then, if it comes out in December is what you're saying. So that's perfect.
Okay.
So Mr.
Thank you.
Did that, so you would still be in your timeline of the requirement, but then you're putting it in the context of a quick look back, and then where are we on today's map scores? I'm just gonna, like, you know, like leading data.
Okay, that's
But-
what I was getting at, the map
So,
scores.
and if I'm a trustee, I think I want to hear kind of this historical thing, but then I want to see where we are today instead of just only hearing just the look back in the rearview mirror.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for that question. So a lot of districts and superintendents, and I'm going to wrap this, I'm going to land this plane after this comment. I have friends, colleagues, previous colleagues saying, you know, they're all in, good idea, and then we get here and talk about pulling the curtain back with the board, and they're like, oops, nope, sorry, we're out. They get their 1 year taper report, that's enough, right? Because it's like you're going to encourage them to get in the weeds. Now, I naively for 21 years had a positive presupposition that every trustee just needed more information, you know, to just know what was going on. That was the presupposition. You know, and it's this clarity about, and tonight we're going to ask questions, and I'm going to just say this like real plainly. None of the questions are, what do you want us to do? Okay, is that fair enough? But it's, what do you see that is a strength? What do you see that's still unclear? What's the third question, David? Improvement? Yes. Do you see that there's an improvement that may be needed? Now, that's the closest we're doing to this blending between the strategic and tactical role. Updates, thank you. Do you think what's unclear, and do you think that there are any updates? And just to be crystal clear, even tonight, if we find updates just because they're said tonight and even written on the chart paper does not mean that the tactical team's going to go right back and do those. Just so you know, it's feedback. Like, did we hear something? In fact, tonight, it's really just getting the questions and then give the tactical team time to work on the questions, if that makes sense. And Mr. President, does that make sense? Like, we're not necessarily answering the questions tonight. We're just receiving the questions, or the cabinet. Is fair enough? Is that all right with everybody? I think that frames that up good enough. And there was 2 of those in there. We must have really liked that slide. Here, let's look at it a third time. Tonight, at the very end, we're going to talk more about the aligned arrows. I promised you earlier I would skip that and this, because we're going to take 5 minutes at the very end. This concept of asking good strategic questions might be germane to tonight. And I know this one's not on there, but my dad was a school board president. I think y'all told you all that when I became a superintendent. He wasn't my boss, but he was the next town over. So I got to see him every weekend at the cafe, and I helped him. I did chores every Saturday. 32-year-old superintendent with 3 kids working on a PhD. I just went and helped my daddy with chores every Saturday. You know, and the way he would say it is, you know, the board members don't need to know why it's painted red. They just need to know what the process is for determining paint color. That's a good way to look at it. And, you know, he would tell me things like, don't tell me as a board member how to think, just tell me what I need to think about. I'm just rattling off the things that I heard for the first time 32 years ago, and it just stuck in my mind. So this process is kind of built around this, and what we're learning around the state is It's tough, like we think in tactical and operational language, all of us, me included. That's why I struggled when I got on the TRS board. We've got to learn, it's hard for us, but we've got to learn to ask questions that are more strategic. So when you look at like the first one, how do we select comparative data? We're going to talk about that a little bit tonight. How do we select second one, comparative data? How do we ensure? How do we listen and interact and observe? How do we get input? These are strategic questions. We've talked about the scorecard as a tool. It's not just a world in and of itself. It's an execution tool. Last two slides. These are things that we're seeing around the state. When board members leave the strategic role, it's usually, this is what doesn't have to be one of these 5, but these are the 5 that we're seeing right now consistently around the state. They're assuming that what they do at work works in a school district. They assume that a specific tactical or operational problem that they had encountered at church or at work, with the same response would work for the school. The third one we just talked about, it's not as tough to think about tactics and operation. Thinking strategically is tough. I do believe this happens every single day. Just do what I'm saying and it'll be a quicker fix. I'm a trustee and I'm just saying, just do this. And the superintendent's thinking, man, if I do that, every teacher at that elementary school is going to quit. You know, because like it's school. And then the last one we just talked about, it's tough to think about these strategic questions. And then these are the 4 telltale signs that an individual board member's left the strategic role. They do their own research rather than asking the tactical team to bring the research back. My first district, my second district that's not too far from here, at my first board meeting, a trustee showed up with a flip chart for my first board meeting and brought posters of his own research. I was 36 years old, and I just remember writing on my notepad, Houston, we have a problem. I didn't know what the problem was. I didn't know how to fix it. But he afterwards I said, do we need to get you some flip charts? And he just said, I don't know. So I'm going to do my own research. I was like, okay, now what can we do to help you trust us to do the research for you? Let's just start there. So that's usually a telltale sign. Dominating discussion, not letting others share opinion. We're seeing this blue one quite a bit right now. One vote occurs, and it did not go the way that the trustee wanted it to go, so it's a 6-1 vote or a 5-2 vote. And as you all know, Mr. President, like the vote happens and then it's supposed to be over, right? And I think Facebook or social media is like hurting us because they just won't let it go and they're putting stuff on Facebook. Or social media, it's not just Facebook. It's all social media, but we're seeing a lot of that happen in the blue. I think social media is amplifying the blue arrow right now across the state. And then we have adopted board operating procedures, and then trustees are not following them. So anyway, that's kind of the end of the introduction, Dr. Hollingsworth and Mr. Pitts and Mr. Cooper in particular. Did that generate any questions? I know we're throwing a lot out fast. Yeah, well, sir, you have to hear it the first time, right? I'm happy to send you the PowerPoint. I'm happy to get on the phone with any questions that you have, and I'm serious about that. So vision without systems thinking, paints a lovely picture of the future, but no deep understanding. I would argue your performance management tool, scorecard, we've got the vision, and then we've got action aligned to the vision. And with that, Dr. Hollingsworth, that kind of sets up the next step, but I'll see if you have anything before we transition. Everybody good? I'm going to yield the podium, I believe, to a couple. who have a little more granular information, I do reserve the right to weigh in from the cheap seats. Okay.
Dr. Benneker and Ms. Hilburn are going to give us an overview of our academic update.
All right. Good afternoon, Board. Dr. Hollingsworth. So it's very appropriate that we are here today to talk about our academic performance, and priority one is student growth. So we'll go through this with you at the table in just a little while, and you'll understand more of why priority one is all about student growth, but it's the most important work that we're doing with our students. So as we go through this, I'm going to set a couple of things up for you just to kind of give you an overview. We've been sending you reports since they came out at the end of May, giving you our A to F updates, EOC scores, STAR scores, and trying to keep you up to date on everything that's come out as soon as we've gotten those scores. A couple of things that I wanted to point out before we go further into this information with you tonight. TEA in 2023 in their A to F refresh published some information here, and one thing that I highlighted there at the bottom, I'll talk about that more in detail. Prior to 2023, cut scores are updated every year. And in 2017, they said, we're going to hold these scores for 5 years. And so at 2022 to 2023, there was a change in the scores. We were playing based off scores from 5 years previous. So in 2022 and 2023, the state came out and they said that you can't compare these scores side by side. It's an apples to orange comparison versus the year before, it would have been apples to apples. So in 2023, when they did the refresh, they pointed out a number of things. So one of them I'm really going to hit on right here that's highlighted at the bottom is in 2023, it's possible that a campus with an A in 2022 could have improved academically, but yet received a B based on the new scores. So one area that really affected us here in WISD is CCMR, and so it's in small print right there, but if you could see it right below that line that says improvement in college, career, and military readiness. So it says in 2017, the cut scores were set, and the goal was to get to 90% for all students to reach that to receive an A. At that time, in 2017, the average across the state was a 47. So for them to set a 90 as the cut score would have put everybody into a bad place. So they came back together, they looked at that, and they set the cut score at 60. And so for 5 years, we were playing with a 60 to reach an A academically for the CCMR portion of our scorecard here. So we'll go through this in further detail to show you again how that change right there really impacted us when it came to our CCMR ratings. So what TEA was saying was that districts across the state could have anticipated to be rated academically better, but received a score lower. So if you had an A in 2022, expect to be a B under the new system. Expect to be a C if you had a B the previous year, and then if you had a C, expect to be a D. So you'll remember that last year those scores were halted, and it's currently in litigation right now, and those scores have not been released. So we don't know last year's scores. They've actually taken away anything that we had to be able to go in and calculate what it would have been because of the litigation that's currently pending right now.
So my job is to take a 45-minute presentation and teach y'all in 5 minutes. Y'all ready? We're going to do our best, okay? So what we try to do here is explain the difference and how things have evolved over time. And so if you look on the left-hand side, it'll say 2021-22, but it says STAR 1.0. So back during that time, we were an 85. And here's how we feel as educators. Have you ever thrown the dart, and when you throw the dart, they move the dartboard? And you're not on target. That's kind of how we feel. It's like you learn how to play the game, you learn the system, you learn how all the changes that have taken place, and as soon as school districts learn that, guess what they do? Oh, we're going to change. And so that's the big difference between the 1.0 and the 2.0, so I'm going to break that down a little bit. Within that box, it tells you things that have changed on this. So you have structure. Structure meaning there's question types. And we have this on your table for later, but the questions completely changed. And what do I mean by that? They went from multiple choice questions and STAR 1.0 to we went online in STAR 2.0, but we also changed the question types. So only 75 points can come from multiple choice. The rest of them come from these new question item types. And so it's not a multiple choice A, B, C, D, get to choose, I think this one's it. Students are really having to think and look through it. And so you'll be able to see this a little bit later. Content changed. We changed TEKS during that time. Reading language arts TEKS changed. In STAR 1.0, we went from having, if you remember this, we went from having writing in grades 4 and 7. That went away. Now they added that writing back in all the tests, and they're called extended constructed responses. One of the things in the lawsuit, the first lawsuit right now is, if you've heard, extended constructive responses was based off AI grading that. They don't call it AI, they have their own term for it. And don't completely quote me on this, but it's somewhere around that 50% range that students scored a 0 on the writing. Y'all, our kids are writing. It may not be exactly how AI is scoring it, but they're writing. And so again, it goes back to we have to learn what that looks like. Cut points changed. If y'all remember last year when we got scores back, we had the zone of uncertainty. We had the likely kids that passed and the kids that unlikely passed. The state didn't even know, so how were we supposed to know on things like that? So on the next slide, I really broke down from 2017 and 18, which that started A through F, we were at an 82. Then we went to 18, 19. Hey, we're learning this now. We're getting in our groove. We hit that 89. And then what hit? COVID hit. Okay? So we didn't even have STAR that year. Remember, we went home in March and we didn't come back. And then when we came back in 2021, that was, some schools were back, some schools weren't. We actually made the decision, I think that was November timeframe, to bring all our kids back, but we didn't have a rating that year. But you'll also, the following year, we did well, but it was still STAR 1.0. We hadn't changed anything yet. Then last year they come up, and Dustin's gonna refer to this a little bit more, they changed a lot of cut points, and one of the biggest cut points was in the CCMR, and we do have a slide on that that really shows you the effect that it had. The state didn't even really know some of these cut points because, like I said, we had the zone of uncertainty. We had kids that were likely to pass and kids that were unlikely to pass. And so that transition from 1.0 to 2.0, not only did you have COVID in there, but you changed reading language arts TEKS. We went away from, like I said, 4-7 writing to actually embedding that in what's called an extended constructed response. We had new blueprints during that time. So it was a big change. And so there was no rating there. Then this year we came along, and here we go again. We're in that part where they were supposed to have a hearing today with the lawsuit. They postponed that till September 16th. But based off the information that we have right now, we're sitting at that 77 slot, just based off the information we have. Yes, sir.
But I want to put together the 2 or 3 slides that y'all just went over, and I want to pause and recognize here. So what you just told me is it would be completely invalid to compare an 18-19-89 with a 23-24-77.
Those tests look completely different.
Apples and oranges.
The cut points were completely different.
Thank you.
Yes. This, in a nutshell, is your A through F. And here's what a lot of people think. This is all about STAR scores. Oh my gosh, this is so much bigger than STAR scores. This is where I was talking about, if I was really doing a presentation over A through F, a minimum it would take me 45 minutes to go over this one page. It is not just looking at STAR scores. We have to look at, and I hate to refer it sometimes, but we have to know the rules. We have to learn how to play the game. And we're starting over with 2.0. We're starting over kind of with COVID and where we landed. But I'm going to kind of break this down. You'll see on the left-hand side, and you're going to get this handout as well. On the left-hand side says student achievement. And then it says elementary schools and middle schools. That is STAR, okay? It's 100% STAR, and 100% of their STAR scores count in this category. But when you go down just a little bit, you'll see where it says high schools. High schools have 3 areas in this domain 1. They have STAR scores, which counts 40%. They have college and career military readiness, and this is where Dr. Beneker is talking about they changed the cut score so drastically, and he's going to show you a visual on that in a little bit. That counted 40%. And then graduation rates, and actually I'm going to back up for a second. I want y'all to, no, it's the next slide. I'm ahead of myself a little bit. I'm going to show you how even our graduation rate, as high as it was, only earned us a score of an 80. And so it's difficult to get there. So that's domain 1 is student achievement. Domain 2 is school progress, which is what we're talking about today with our 1.1 and our balanced scorecard and students growing. This is 100% based off growth. Growth for STAR only is in reading and in math. Why, you ask? Is because those are the only 2 tests that a student takes every single year. So it's the only 2 tests that students can show growth. The state did change, and this is one area that was good for our growth piece. They did change, and if you know performance levels, you've all heard of do not meets, approaches, meets, and masters, right? They did change it within like approaches. There's approaches low and approaches high. A student could maybe not jump from approaches to meet and just go from approaches low to high and still show growth. So that is one area that's a good thing. Relative performance is what it says is if you have a high economically disadvantaged population, the state recognizes that sometimes your STAR scores are going to be lower. But on the flip side of that, it understands if your economically disadvantaged population is low, then your STAR score should be high, okay? That's domain 1 and domain 2. And the way A through F works is you get to pick the higher of the two. So whatever you score the highest in, you get to take that score. Closing the gaps in a nutshell is school progress, which is your growth, which your 1.1 balanced scorecard. It's also STAR. It also throws TELPAS in there. It actually hits you STAR twice. And so what happens is you don't only get hit in one place, like for STAR in domain 1, you get hit again in closing the gaps, okay? Our big focus is 1.1 scorecard in the growth, and I'll tell you why. You can take 70%. Remember, you get to take the highest of domain 1 and domain 2, right? Closing the gaps is 30%, but 15% of that can come from growth. So when you add 70% and 15%, what does that come up to? 85%. That's why this is a huge focus for us, that we want students to grow. And if students grow and we're meeting kids where they are and we're growing them, it's going to take care of everything else on that page.
Just to add, that's why we have as our highest priority, every student grows academically every year, because of exactly what she just explained.
Yeah, so we are projecting where we would fall based on the current information that we have right now. So I came across a news article about a week ago, and I sent it to Dr. Hollingsworth and Dr. Averett, and the article talks about the only districts in the state that have come out and shared their accountability at this point are Dallas, Garland, and Houston. So we kind of went back and forth, and I said, why not be transparent and share this information? We've shared it with y'all, and now that we have a calculation or a projection, I felt that it was appropriate that we share it with you all, and now it's publicly being shared. And this is our best estimate based on all of the data that we have. So again, if you look at 2022, we were an 85, a B rating. Apples to orange comparison, if we were to get a score today, we project we would be a 77, which would give us a C.
So this next slide kind of goes over and breaks everything down and how it works. The other big thing that changed, I want you to look in that far, not the far right column, but right next to that it says weight. Used to, every campus weighted the same. You put it all in the pool, all in the basket, we averaged it out and you got a grade. This is the next thing the state changed. It's now weighted based off your campus population, the students taking STAR. So what that tells me is if you look at Cliff, they're weighted at 3.7%. And so when we take their estimate and we multiply that, that means they contribute to the district 2.22 points. Same thing, you go down to Dunaway. They got a score of 80. They count 2.9% of our overall population that takes STAR. That counts for 2.32 points. Okay, so that's one area. Remember I talked to you about domain 1. So you can see that first column. The state doesn't make it easy. They give you a score and then they go, okay, here's the website that you actually have to go scale this score now. So you can see some of those. I'll use Simpson as an example. You see Simpson in domain 1 is a 55 and I have equals 83. Well, yes, they were a 55, but it equates to an overall grade of 83 in that area, okay? So I went through that for every single campus. But then you look over down at the bottom, remember how I referred to elementary and junior high is all about STAR in domain 1, but high schools have CCMR and they have graduation rates. Dr. Benneker is going to go over some of those scores in just a little bit, so that'll be easier to understand and also have a different visual. But this is what I was talking about, WHS, when you look at graduation rates, it's nothing to hang our hat at. They were 96.8% graduates and it only equated to an 80, okay? Then domain 2 is our growth. And so you're probably going, hey, why are some of these highlighted in green and some are not? Remember, you get to take the higher of the two, either domain 1 or domain 2. So what it says is the ones that are green in domain 1, they scored higher there. The ones that are green in domain 2, which is our growth, they scored higher there. Our goal is to take all those green in domain 1 and make them all green in domain 2. And then domain 3, remember, I told you was a combination really of domain 1 and domain 2. And then in that teal estimate piece, based off the information that we have, those would be the scores that we have for each campus at this point. Next up, we talked about, and I liked your analogy on the painting part. You know, sometimes we paint this and go, hey, we know green is good, we know red is not so good, but we also know those are the areas that we definitely know that need our focus. But here's the issue. They're all going to get our focus. They're all going to get our attention, because it's like that barrel of water that has holes in it and it starts leaking. And as soon as you put your thumb on one, what happens to the other hole? It starts leaking, right? And so you can't just focus on one area. We want to focus on all areas to make sure we improve on that. So what it has here is 3rd through 8th grade. It shows you the difference between WISD. So if it's green, we did better than the state. If it's red, and you'll see a lot of those, they're minor. They're not real big differences. But there are also areas that we know we want to work on.
So on math, I'll point out a couple of things. We know we had some opportunities with math. 4th grade math, we made some major changes in our curriculum at the elementary level. We also know that 7th grade math has been an issue for us, but it was across the state. If you look at the scores, we're not where we want to be. The state's not where the state wants to be. And we've also made some shifts there at the 7th grade level with our curriculum in that program as well. So we're really addressing these areas. I actually had a meeting this afternoon with one of our textbook contacts and talked about how 7th grade looked across the state, and everyone in every district was kind of scratching their heads with the same thing. So 7th grade math did not look good anywhere. We don't look good either, and we know that, but we're making some shifts to adjust and address that. Reading was an area where we put a lot of focus last year. If you look at the did not meet and approaches, we outperformed the state in both of those areas. So on the did not meet, we want to be lower than the state, so that's why those are green. In approaches, we wanted to be higher, and we were. And in all those categories right there, we know we've still got some work to do with our meets and master's students, reaching the kids that are at the top of that. So making sure they've got challenging on grade level curriculum given to them every day. Those have been the students that are sitting in some of our classes right now that are kind of, you know, they get a little squirrely in class and they're not being challenged academically. So we've made some shifts to address that.
And this is where the whole piece in the telescoping and the accelerated math and sciences that we have that you've heard about and all the great things that are going on, that will help address some of those concerns that we have with the meets and masters. And so, again, those are areas that we're addressing. And then you have your science. And so overall, that comes in 5th and 8th grade. The do not meets and the approaches are in the green, and like we just saw in the reading, the red portion is the area that we want to look at. I also think that we have a tendency as just educators and people in general. Sometimes we gravitate towards students that are struggling a little bit more. And sometimes we think our upper level kids are okay, but they also need attention. It kind of goes back to that analogy that you can't just plug up one hole. You got to look at every area and address that. And then social, yes, sir.
One of the things I want to point out, when we have conversation up here, and you all have heard presentations from Melissa Abity for advanced academics, this is getting at these meets and master scores when we say we are under challenging our kids. So y'all know we've been very concerted about encouraging our 5th to 6th grade families to get their kids to take harder stuff, right? So if I can take more of those pre-AP or advanced options in junior high, it yields fruit in the long run. And that's exactly what we're doing to address those meets and masters, to challenge kids more.
And sometimes that's difficult. You know, like my nephews, they need to be taking those classes, but, you know, they resist that. But they definitely need that. And then, of course, our 8th grade science across the board, we were all higher than the state for each performance level.
So our freshmen are the most lucky group of our students. They get Algebra 1, Biology, and English 1, 3 tests in that first year. You can see that we performed relatively well at our Algebra 1 across the board at our did not meets, approaches, and meets levels. We're right there on the edge of that master's level. Biology, if you look at those numbers, we're just in line with the state, but if you look at those scores, 90 percentile, that's not a bad number at all, but we're not above the state, so that's why those are all red. And then English 1, you can see those as well. English 2 has historically been a very difficult test, but you can see that we still outperform the state in at least 3 of those categories right there. U.S. history is an area where our students have performed well for years. So if I went back and I looked at our U.S. history scores for the last several years, you'd see that we always outperform the state. So we're really proud of the work that we're doing there. So breaking down CCMR a little bit more for you, and I'll clarify that count is just a word to capture the number of cells that calculated something. So count A doesn't mean anything. It's just the number of students that hit in those buckets right there. So the numbers that you're seeing right here are actually the students from 2024 that just graduated. This will not impact our accountability until next fall. So we put all of this work, all of this is going into the bank. We're going to save this for next year. The numbers that you're seeing on our CCMR scores right now are from the students that graduated 2023, a year ago, when they changed the cut score. So all of the work that we did this past spring, all the work that happened, Ms. Spinnaker, the CCMR advisors on the campuses, Global, High School of Choice, WHS, all of the work that they did to get that from, the 60th percentile to 86th percentile, that's gonna pay off for us in the fall of next school year.
Can I add one thing?
Absolutely.
In talking, when Dr. Gibson was talking about this in taper, a lot of things on the taper are lagging indicators. You want immediate data and you want to do something about it, but sometimes the state doesn't report that until a year later. This is just one of many things that are lagging indicators that we have to look at.
Yeah, and here's an example of that so that you could see. Based on the 2022 scores, a 60 would have yielded an 80. In 2023, they changed that 60 to an 88. So we had already graduated those students. I think Dr. Averitt was the one who said the hay was already in the barn. We could not go back and change the work that our students in 2023 did in the fall of 2022 in the fall of 23. So those students had already graduated, they'd already gone off to college. We could not go back and impact the work that they had done. But this past year, we did a lot of work to put us ahead for this next school year. Just another way to break down, this is what you'll see again. So you'll see these numbers in the fall of 25, looking at each of those campuses there. And I understand they had a meeting last week, and Dr. Averitt shared that where our students are starting off now is where we started off in the spring of this year. So we're a semester ahead with our seniors from where we were this past school year. So we're already that much further ahead to get us where we need to be moving forward. So we're going to do some work when we come back to the tables, and I kind of wanted to talk about where we're going and what we're doing and how we focus our work in all of our departments. You'll see a letter and number out to the side of each of these bullet points right here. So data dashboards is something that we look at. We're looking at how our students perform on all kinds of tests. Dawn and her team have put together some amazing dashboards. We've got a 24 to 48 hour window from when an assessment is completed to when they're pulling that information and making it visible for teachers to see on their campus.
Well, the thing I want to add about that, and Dawn has said this unprompted to me on numerous occasions. One of the things I'm really proud of is our focus over the last 2 years on PLC has created an environment where Dawn will tell you in the last 9 months, we have more people approaching her and Jason, who we affectionately call Data Dawn and Data Dude. They are routinely asking for them to come out and guide them through how to better approach this data. It was not happening a year and a half ago, but now because of the work we've done with PLC, our focus that we've had across all campuses, she is reporting that they are hearing a lot more requests from PLCs and principals and teachers to come and work with us.
I even get yelled at in the chip aisle at HEB, hey, Data Dawn, I have a question. Well, you got to turn around and answer that, so.
She shared last week, and I joked about this in a district leadership meeting last week, that someone reached out to her, or they wanted to know, is Data Dawn a machine? Is it a program, or is it a real person? Because they'd heard about Data Dawn and Data Dude and the work that's happening. So Data Dawn is a person. She's a real person. So yeah, each of the things that are on here that we're addressing, these are all areas that we focus on the balanced scorecard that we're looking at all the time. So high quality instructional materials is 1.1b. Through our work with education elements, we're working on professional learning for all of our staff that also works with our PLC process. So PLCs, 1.1c, you can see those things. Every Monday morning, Dr. Averitt and Ms. Mott meet with their elementary principals and the secondary principals, and they talk about the classroom walkthroughs. Cabinet has even set a goal for ourselves. So we're out on campuses, we're in classrooms, we're in PLCs, we're seeing what's happening, and those are all numbers that we report back on. So it's hard for us to know what's happening in a classroom if we're not in the classroom. Same thing with our principals, and they've got a goal that they go through weekly where they try and hit every single classroom, and they're calling those instructional sweeps, where they want to hit every class and see what's happening, and there's some more thorough classroom walkthroughs that they do as well. And then our House Bill 1416 right there is 11E. So what are we doing to address students that are not performing how we need them to perform? What are we doing from an MTSS standpoint to make sure that we're intervening for those students academically? So I'm going to show the groups that are up here. I'm going to go back to a slide in just a second. So the work that we're going to set ourselves up for when we come out to the tables out here, going through the balanced scorecard, looking at these areas that we've identified, and I think Dr. Gibson's going to come back and facilitate this next part. So I'll go to the slide with the groups. And I'll pause right there if you've got questions for me.
Can we go back to that CCMR slide?
Yes, sir. Which one do you want?
All right, am I getting these numbers right? Can we pause there for a second? Because I heard this and then I haven't really seen it. What just happened right there?
So in 2022,
Okay, say it in the
2022, the state came in and said that, if you're looking on the left-hand side of this, a 60 would get you an A before. In 2023, you've got to move that 60 to an 88. So those students that already graduated, our scaled score was a 71. Raw score was a 66 in 2022. So you can see the change in that scale right there.
And it counted 40% of domain 1.
And it was a number that at that point, we can't go back. The state's saying, we're going to change the scale on you. Those kids left you last year and you can't do anything about this, which is why the lawsuit happened and all the districts halted release of those scores, because this would have tanked every district across the state. So huge change that they made, jumping it up 28 points to go from a 60 to an 88 to get that A.
So inside that change that you can't go back and do anything about, what actually happened in Waxahachie with respect to CCMR?
I don't think we slowed our pace at all. We've been pushing industry-based certifications. We've been pushing TSI, making sure that our students are ready. We've been doing a lot of work in the 5 years that I've been here in this district. Industry-based certifications was one of the #1 things when I came here that I was told that we needed to remedy. I couldn't tell you the number off the top of my head. I want to say it's in the 600 to 700 range right now of students that earned industry-based certifications. The year prior to my arrival, I think it was 7. So it's a pretty significant impact of the work that's been taking place in CTE. And so it's not something that we ever stopped or changed our game. We just added more of a concerted effort to that to make sure that we're capturing as many kids that we could and truly reaching out to every single senior to try and target and figure out what can we do to make sure that they're earning that indicator to get us to the point that we needed to get as a district.
So that is a good example of this MOY concept, because you're going to look at data that's old as if it's new, and then we're hearing that there's the data that you're hearing the taper, and it's going to be based on old data, but that's not a reflection of the current reality, if that makes sense. Is that a fair statement? So that's why do the taper, but then look at where you actually are. To me, that's a really good example of that. And there's a bunch of other examples, but that's one good example back to our earlier conversation of why we would maybe do those back to back. Sorry, I just wanted to.
Well, I'm glad you pointed that out. And the other thing I want the trustees, I want to point out to anybody watching at home, we just took a really kind of a unique step that very few districts in the state have done, and we just said, hey, here's where we're projected to be. So we have laid out there, so anybody says you guys are hiding the ball, nope, we gave you our best projection. You can go to that slide that shows you a projection by campus, and you can see our projection of a 77 to be a C for the district. And we're just being very transparent. I think that's really important. As y'all get questions about academic performance, we can hold our heads high on that.
And it's a C that would have been a B a year ago and would have been an A 3 years ago.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure everybody understands that. So at the same time, coming right out of a pandemic, just to kind of recap, nothing new here, we're going to ratchet up the expectations and start grading through computer programs that in large part failed this year. Now, just let me pause on that for just a second. So the artificial intelligence, I understand potentially using that for scoring writing, because you literally have to have this whole tranche of scorers down there to score writing. But the prompt, the software did not understand the prompt that we were being told to use, and so it just, I think, incorrectly failed half of them. Is that what you're hearing? It just incorrectly failed a half of them. So these kids sat there and poured their heart out and typed the deal, got a 0 because it just didn't read the prompt right. And the state has admitted, like, there was a glitch there, so I'm not revealing anything here. They've admitted that there was a glitch. But that's the environment that we're working in right now, which to me, as I was sitting there listening to this, good report, this is why I think we need to look at MAP. We've talked about, the importance of MAP, because the state information is kind of going like this right now, and we're trying to find this through line that we can make sense of. Is that fair to say? So we don't get too excited one way or the other on all these changes, and we just kind of use NWE MAP as a tool to kind of be a through line, a constant number to number to number. Is that, that's the way I see it in my head.
And I just got an email on, I think Friday, from MAP that says they've changed their cut points to try to more mirror what STAR's doing right now. The problem is on a lot of these, and MAP's so great, is TEA rolls things out. Well, it takes all these other programs time to adjust to what they're doing. And so MAP, I think at this point has done that. They did a study to change that. So I'm pretty sure once we do MAP here pretty soon, it's going to more align with those cut points that are truly with STAR right now.
And that's achievement and proficiency. So if we're looking at individual students, how they're performing, we want to see that individual student's growth year over year versus proficiency or mastery on a test.
And this is not the end of this conversation. This is the beginning of this conversation, right? Because that trying to get MAP to help us have a constant that we can look at, it is really important to this process, is all I'm going to say, I guess, about it. And then, again, the middle of the year report is to look at that data and talk about that data. So, by the way, in this case, MAP is not what I love, the globe, and pointing at things. It's actually an acronym for something. What MAP? I don't know. Measures of academic progress. There you go. Okay. Yes, sir.
You touched on it briefly, but I was just curious, the 85 we got in 2022 and then the 77 we're estimating, did y'all do a calculation to know exactly like what that would have been on the old scale? I mean, we know it would be higher. I just didn't know if it would bump it up to an A or not sure.
You'd have to really do some digging, I think, to try to figure that out.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
The reason it's so difficult to try to compare those two things is because there's so many differences in how our students are tested, which is really why we're saying this is really an apples. You can't compare the 89 in 19 or before 1920 to a 77 now, because what we're asking kids to do is just different. I'm sorry, Pat.
No, but Mr. McCutcheon, it will be very valid for us too moving forward. We've got a baseline. So we've got a baseline of performance, and now it'll be very valid for us over the next several years to see how we're doing. And we can start that middle of year when we come back together in February. We'll give you our best data.
I think that is a really good way to look at it. Like pandemic, wobble, lawsuit, stop, and like let's try to anchor to where we are and then have MAP as something to look at. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Dr.
Nope.
Contra, but I'm just doubling down on what you're saying. That's a really good way. This spring, to me, really is like the start of a new trajectory.
Absolutely. All right, we ready to go into groups?
I think it would be good for everybody to get to the groups and then get a scorecard in your hand, and then we'll set it up, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So I guess we'll do 1 here, 2 there, 3 here, 4 there. gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun.
That would be a problem. I think the president as well.
The board president and superintendent have taken a break, so does anyone else need to take a break real quickly? If you're ready, we'll, okay. Yeah, if we take a, we'll take a 2-minute break. How about that?
We only have one restaurant.
A two-ish minute break. Are we having fun?
Not the one that. So I want you to look at this one. It's got it all. Yes, you're. Okay, so for now, are you ready? Would you like to have them do this? Okay, so you want to send the one that you're gonna work on and we'll just send this one to our group.
Yep. I've got one, yep. Thank you. Good?
Yeah, that was great. So after they've had a chance to work in a group, 15 minutes or so, identify some strengths, then we can ask them to report out, is my thought. And I've got the mic right there to do a Phil Donahue.
Okay. Okay, good. So is there someone, remind me, and David, someone's coming to do the 1.1 quick update, right? Or am I just running through this?
I think you're just going to run through.
Okay, all right.
Or are we just going to tell them what to do?
Okay, good. That's even better. We good to roll?
We're good. Yes, sir.
All right, we're going to get started on this section. Yes, sir. Oh, okay, thank you. So if you want a term for what we're doing, I don't have one, but the closest I can come up with, we're calling these a strategic roundtable. And I like the idea of calling it that because we're getting off the dais, we're getting the tactical and the strategic team together, and we're talking, and we're running through things, if that makes sense. So we're just calling it a strategic roundtable, even though we're in a set of 4 roundtables, if you will. Ryan, can I borrow your chart and a black marker, please? So the big chart paper. I'm gonna just do one demo real quick. So if you will, we're going on the scorecard, just to orient you to the scorecard. If you look at the performance objectives, those are the items that the board adopted, column 2. So you adopted 1.1, Dr. Hollingsworth referenced it earlier, every student grows academically every year in English language arts, reading, math, science, social studies. And then you just have in your possession tonight priority 1, which is students. You don't even have staff, state community, or financial outcomes. They're not part of this packet because you can have it anytime you want it, but tonight we're focusing on priority 1, students. In the interest of time, Mr. President, I lost you. We're right here. Mr. President, I'm recommending to the group that we dive into 1.1 and 1.3. Now, I'm going to do a little test here. Why would I say, y'all look on your scorecard, and a trustee, why would I say let's focus on 1.1 and 1.3 tonight and not 1.2 and 1.4? I like what you're saying. I like what you're saying. What's the difference between 1.1 and 1.3 and 1.2 and 1.4? Like, what's the difference between those?
1.1 and 1.3 focus on student.
Right. It's all student performance, if I can split hairs, but it's more academic performance. Is that fair, sir? I know where you were going. You're 100% correct. And then the other 2 are more of the support, the extracurricular. So like if we're going to get in academic brain, like let's just stay in academic brain and run through this exercise tonight with that. Then, David, and Dr. Hollingsworth, I would just recommend we use this. I think these get faster once you if that makes sense. And I didn't want us to try to boil the ocean tonight. Let's just look at these 2 and let's kind of get used to this being a format for feedback. And Mr. President, if it works, we can know that periodically throughout the year, we're just going to get off the dais. We're going to run a feedback session, maybe on priority 2 one time, or something, and we'll just run a feedback session, right back to the dais, and head back to the meeting. Does that make sense? But we're just saying, let's get off of the dais and let's come down. Let's give some feedback. Does that give you a thought? Okay, I just saw a little bit of a smile. I thought it might have been a thought. So do you? Let me touch this button. Someone already did it. So. Upper left-hand corner, 1.1, and then just divide, and like this, yours is going to be done. You're not behind. I'm giving it to you. Strengths for 1.1 at the top, unclear in the middle, any updates needed at the bottom. And we're going to give each group 15 minutes to talk just about 1.1, talk through it as a team. Remember, we've got tactical and strategic at the table now, so someone's got to kind of take the lead and talk through 1.1, and then we're going to capture feedback from the trustees. Fair enough? Tactical team, you don't get to give feedback. You should know this stuff. That was a joke. Ryan. All right, 1 minute, final thoughts. Where's Phil Donahue? You want to do it? Okay. I think report out now. I think what. All right. Now there's some learning inside this because board members, the tactical team can talk about this forever, but we're interacting tactical and strategic, so it's just high level, fast question. Does that make sense? And so my point is, if trustees, if you ever want a full day workshop on 1.1, I think just ask for it, and the staff can do it in about 30 minutes. They can have you a full day lined up and ready to go. And in that kind of quick snippet and just check in, let's hear from the group. So group one, is this group one, Ryan? Were y'all group one? So here's group one. And Lisa, are you the designated reporter from the group? You're staring at it there. Allegedly, this is a microphone so that everybody can hear you at home.
Okay, so do you just want us to go through each one of our
Now, if you
items?
don't mind, so the first one
Okay,
was strength, yes.
Okay, we just talked about that we really are focusing on every student growing. Talked about how our GT state plan, we are adhering very closely to that with our clustering at the elementary level. Also, our data on our dashboard reflects, it's very nice color coded, as students are falling backwards, like if they were at the meets standard and they fall back to approaches, our teachers can very quickly find that information. So those are strengths.
Okay. I tell you what, let's run strengths,
Okay.
and then thank you. Yeah, just pass the talking stick.
For group, talking stick. For group two, the strength that we kind of landed on was we feel really good about our aligned and adopted reading and math curriculum for K-5. And we feel like that is a strength of our district.
All right. It's okay. We're going 1, 2, 4, 3.
Okay, we had the use of high-quality instructional materials as a strength. We like the PLCs and what they're doing, the walkthroughs in the classrooms, and then Dr. Binnicker was telling us about a monthly look or a snapshot that you guys do of where students are, and I think that's a good thing, too, to keep the information that's fresh right in front of you to be able to pivot if you need to.
Very good.
All right, we talked about how student growth is our priority, and that's evident in 1.1A. And then having this meeting tonight is pulling all the right people together is an important step in making sure that we're moving forward.
That's a really good, thank you. That's a good observation because that's the process, like sitting here and looking at you would be surprised how many times that a strategic plan is adopted and it's stuck on a wall or put in the PowerPoint on the website and it's never looked at again, right? And we're checking in on it. Okay, what is unclear?
Okay, for us, the unclear was on the long-term desired outcomes, the growth, 63%. How does that, we're just wondering, how does that connect to the 90-60-30 that we've always talked about with accountability?
Great question. Not going to answer it tonight, but great question. It will be answered.
We talked about on the common assessment piece that we've talked about having common formative assessments of what does that really look like across so many different disciplines, and that's kind of confusing to us. That's kind of unclear. It's like what does that look like?
Very good.
This was mainly for me and Debbie, but we were unsure what a MTSS was, a multi-tier support system, correct? And there's the different levels as you go through. I compared it to maybe like a level 1, 2, 3 grievance. You just go up the ladder until you get the solution that you need.
I think there's a theme for the MTSS being a little bit unclear, and that's good.
And to be fair, it's something that we're really
Relatively
giving a renewed amount of attention to, you know.
Thank you. We talked about how the measurement tools came about and how some of those are still a little bit unclear. And one statistic in particular, how does the graduation rate equate? One of the slides said 97% equaled an 80 versus global, which was 100% as 100.
Hey, just keep the mic, and thank you for and did y'all have any updates?
Updates needed. Let's see, we said it's good that we're using HQIM, and 1.1 can help us use progress measures to determine if HQIM is working.
Okay, very good.
Our update is that we now have a staff member dedicated to MTSS and aligning us across the district.
So there was good discussion on the MTSS and more probing questions, and so I think that's something that you could put as a follow-up report to make sure that the trustees know that y'all, and it wasn't a new position, it was a reconfigured position to have this targeted approach, if that makes sense.
One of the things we landed on updates, we were discussing our use of HQIM and how we can keep our community informed on those resources. And one of the things we talked about was the actual process that teachers go through when they internalize those lessons, and basically showing that process in like a format like this, where we can actually see it in action so folks can see how that actually works.
Yeah, and make sure that makes the final report. I've got some districts, once they are peeling back this scorecard and they're really understanding the strategic actions, they're doing less than a quorum learning walks with trustees and administrators to go look at what that looks like in action. It's not evaluative at all, of course, but it's like, what does MTSS look like on the front line? And so it's not.
Well, to y'all's point, I was at Marvin last week, and I got to watch. I went in with Ms. Polk, the principal, and I watched a kindergarten team internalize a lesson, and then I watched first grade internalize a lesson. And it was really good for me to see it, because it kind of removed some of the mysteries I had about it.
That's
It was just them going through the lesson, talking through it. What exactly are we going to do when we do this on that day? You know, which resources are we going to pull among the ones that are provided through Amplify and Eureka? How are we going to do it? And it was really cool.
That's a great example, and it's not a requirement for board members, but an opportunity for individual board members just to go with you to observe that periodically.
Absolutely.
If that makes sense.
Our update was to possibly give the board the current data on a monthly basis if it's available. With us implementing new curriculum, I'm sure there's going to be some people asking how's it going, and at least we can be able to tell them that we're getting the information and give them an update and tell them we're, keeping a finger on that. So.
Exactly, and I was going to say that as we get those common assessments solidified, that becomes a much easier thing to do. Absolutely.
So you may have to initially do a little training of when you get it, this is what it looks like, but then you can just get the reports once you understand how the report reads, right? Fair enough. All right, thank you. I hope that everything that was verbalized is captured in writing. Positive presupposition that it is. New sheet. We're doing speed. This is speed work here. Now we're moving to 1.3. Same drill, 10 minutes on the clock. one of your new board members? Oh, okay. But yeah, he knew what. Oh, okay. I know. He's been off. No, he's, yeah, he gets it.
Okay, so we're on strengths for 1-3. We shared that informational sessions for our gifted and talented programs, our AP, we're doing a better job of those. We have telescoping solidly in place at the elementary level, and industry leadership council is in place.
We said really similar. One of our strengths that we identified was we're doing much better at grades 5 and 8 about making sure our parents understand when our students are going into 6th grade about what the advanced math track needs to do, and when they go in from 8th grade to 9th grade as far as what they need to do in high school. So we feel like we're communicating better with them. We do feel a big strength is our dedicated college and career readiness advisors that we have at WHS and at Global, that we have 3 people dedicated to that.
Okay, we have a few here. The first one is communication with staff, students, and parents. Obviously, the large growth in the number of industry certifications that we've had since Dr. Binnicker's come along, strong community partnerships, the CTE program, and then the telescoping and acceleration program that we currently have.
So we talked about that there's clearly been a concerted effort to increase our CCMR achievements annually, and the results are showing that. And then we've also been prioritizing these non-college, non-traditional options for our students. So some unclear things. We were wondering, because we were kind of on this CCMR part of it, how do we increase the enrollment in these programs as well as other opportunities? We discussed maybe some of the scheduling issues that students are having. And then how do we come up with these new opportunities based upon social and economic needs as we're seeing? Oh, sorry. Yeah, thanks. We also wondered if there had been the implementation where students wouldn't be allowed to have an off period if they had not met their CCMR. That there's been some talk of that, but we weren't sure if that has actually been implemented.
We had that conversation. We did. We didn't pull that trigger, but we have had that conversation.
And that's a good example of the status report of that conversation. Like the follow-up to this is just a status report.
Where we are.
Where you are. That's right.
Okay, we think this may be more of an update, but we just need to, on our scorecard, replace percentages with actual numbers. That was for increase the percentage of students enrolled in advanced academics as a percentage of the total enrollment. I think we just need to update that. And then what are we doing for pre-SAT, ACT at younger grades? That's it.
One of the things we weren't clear about was ASVAB. We talked a lot at our table about how valuable the ASVAB is for students. That kind of can give them a real good direction. I think there's some fear about if you take the ASVAB that you're going to get inundated with recruiting calls, and they will take no for an answer, I think, but we believe that we just don't know how well we're doing with that. And do I go ahead and do updates now? No. Oh.
All right, so this thing's kind of hard to hold. So I said that as a parent, I am somewhat unclear on how to choose the right courses for my child, how to help my child choose the right courses once they get to junior high, to make sure they're on a pathway that will let them do what they want to do. And so we talked about that we really need to focus on educating parents starting in 5th grade on how to help their child kind of choose, do you take advanced classes, do you not take advanced classes, and really just doing more communication with parents throughout the child's journey through junior high and high school that lets the parent help guide the kids.
Very good. Yep. Yes.
Okay. So for the last one, we talked about that soon we're going to have a 7-year plan available to our students starting when they're in junior high, and that right now the 4-year plan is available online, and that we may need to make sure parents are aware of that.
All right. Just, yeah, pass the talking stick. I think that's a good.
Yeah, we had a similar one talking about having updates of starting kids earlier on going for these CCMR options. And then also, how do we incentivize students to get that CCMR meet?
Very good.
Our updates are that we increase our number of telescopers from 1 to 8 or 9 in elementary, and we've increased in AP test administration with a constant success rate.
We looked at our long-term desired outcomes and looked at it from a perspective of we need to update them. And so we looked at the statement about increased percent of students enrolled in advanced academics as percent of total enrollment. We feel like that needs more clarity. And then we looked at our House Bill 3 goal, our CCMR goal from 65% to 95% by June 2028. We felt like that's an area, again, that needs more clarity because there's a lot of different types of outcomes that get to that percentage. We know there's a bunch of different ways to get a CCMR point, but we felt like maybe that we need more clarity there.
Yeah, that I got the chance to kind of step in on that one, and that's a really good example of the importance of this kind of conversation, because if you're doing this right and it's continuous improvement, the more you work on it, the more you start looking over at the outcome going, wait a minute, is that the right number? And I mean, truthfully, if you don't do that, you're maybe not doing the thing correctly, because the more you kind of peel on it and work on it, the lead measures definitely should always be challenged. Because, like, is there a better way to measure that along the way? Fair enough. And so trustees don't panic if the tactical team says, you know what, we were looking at this measure, we're going to keep looking at that measure, but we found another one that really tells that story just as well or better for us. Mr. President, that's my part. I know you all have more tonight. Any questions, trustees or staff members?
The only thing was about systems.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm going to just leave the trustees with a handout, and I've walked away from them, but I'm going to go and I'm going to bring them up here and put them out. Let me have 2 minutes, trustees, and thank you for the reminder, Dr. H. In addition to using the scorecard, the cabinet members or administrative team is using what's called a systems check. And the purpose of the systems check is to look at 30 different processes that are happening throughout the district at any time. We are not just trying to pile on tonight, but trustees, this is just first awareness. So y'all are seeing it, new trustees, the same time that the rest of the trustees are seeing it. Back behind the scenes, your administrative team are evaluating these 30 processes. And we had a good conversation about, do you tell the board about them or not? Is it too much? Is it too little? And the agreement was that we're just going to let you have them. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like in the future, but you might hear cabinet members or superintendent talking about them. So we just wanted you to have a copy of them.
Greg, if you don't mind just pointing out to them, 12 and 13 is kind of where we've landed to focus most of our attention on.
Yeah.
And that was in conversation with our district leadership team and principals. So.
And so if you look, so we're talking about stages of maturity here, and if I can on the first page, and then we're going to flip back to 12 and 13. So stage 1, reacting to problems, processes do not exist, not formalized in writing, not transparent. Stage 2, early systematic approaches. Stage 3, aligned approaches. Stage 4, integrated approaches, mature processes, written, transparent, multiple cycles. So the cabinet now is taking these 30 processes and semi-annually or annually, they're reevaluating where they perceive the district is. And, the first time we did it, it was like, everything's on fire, panic. No, pick 2 or 3 to go from stage 1 to stage 2. Pick 2 or 3 to go from stage 2 to stage 3. And again, I think I said earlier, you can't boil the ocean in 1 year. All we can do is just try to figure out how to navigate the ocean. So this year, they settled on process 12 and process 13, which would make a lot of sense in light of what you just heard about 1.1. So this table's conversation about the MTSS probably came as a result of trying to get your processes tightened up. Is that fair to say? I see heads are nodding, and I was guessing. But when they were working on this 12 and 13, that's when we realized we don't have tight enough processes for MTSS. We've got to fix that. Fair enough. That's probably a good example. So I just want to make sure, trustee, you may start hearing about systems check. Now, what is systems check? I just wanted y'all to know what systems check was.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Greg.
I'm going to go to Graham and clean stalls if that's all right with y'all.
That's not exactly how that phrase ends, but hey.
Okay, that concludes item number 2, our workshop. We will move to item number 3, which is closed session. Unless anyone sees a reason that we need to go in closed session, we're going to skip item 3. Does anyone have a reason we need to go to closed session? Okay, we'll move on to item 4. We'll be reconvened to open session. On item 5, which will be our open forum. At this time, I don't believe we have any individuals signed up to speak, so we will move into item 6, which will be our public hearing. We'll conduct a public hearing regarding the proposed 2024-2025 fiscal year budget and proposed M&O and INS tax rates. So tonight we'll be holding a public hearing to discuss the proposed 2024-2025 budget and proposed 2024 tax rate. We will invite the public to approach the podium and provide any input after Mr. Calden's presentation. Mr. Calden?
Thank you, sir. Good evening, Board and Dr. Hollingsworth. As stated, we are here doing a public hearing for the proposed 24-25 budget and the M&O and INS tax rates. Board, we've been working on this since February. You may remember our 3 budget workshops that we did back in, where am I going? March, June, and earlier this month. So just kind of recapping where we were, we are looking at general fund revenues to increase about 3%, 3.75% to $123 million. The allocation of those revenues are skewing a little bit more local than they have in past. We are expecting a decrease in state revenue this year based on the funding formulas. On the expenditure side, we are proposing a balanced budget where expenditures and revenues are offsetting each other. It is a 2.44% increase in the general fund expenditures. On the debt service side, we are looking at revenue increasing approximately 25.5%. That primarily is due to property value increases, whether they're existing properties being valued at a higher rate or new additional properties to the property tax roll. With our bond model, we did issue $200 million of the $574 million in debt last year. So with that, we are seeing an increase in our expenditures going forward. They're expected to increase about 12% this year. We do not anticipate any use of fund balance in the INS fund. That fund is in a good shape right now. It has a good fund balance to help support it. In the Child Nutrition Fund, we are seeing an expected increase due to student participation. Board, you may remember that we did not increase student meal prices for the 24-25 school year. We did increase adult meal prices by 1/4. And so I'm not going to tell you that that's the 13.5% increase in revenues, but we are anticipating additional student participation across the district. That is a balanced fund as well, without any general fund contribution other than us paying off the alternate meals that the board elects to serve to students who have a deficit fund balance on their account. With that, sir, that is what I have for the budget side. For tax rates, we are looking at a minor decrease in the M&O tax rate due to House Bill 3 compression requirements. Last year it was 0.7575. This year the proposed rate is 0.7552. Again, that is a 0.3% decrease. Interest and sinking tax rate to remain steady at 0.4129. That is the 3-cent increase, 2.9-cent increase that we promised voters with the 2023 bond package passing. In total, show you a 10-year trend of our tax rate. We reached our high point right before the House Bill 3 of 2019 at $1.5539. We had held steady for about 4 years on the total tax rate. Since then, it's decreased more than 38 cents down to $1.1681 is the proposed total rate for the 24-25 school year. With that, Mr. President, that concludes my presentation for the public hearing.
Mr. Calden? At this time, is there anyone willing to come and speak tonight? Do you have any questions for Mr. Calden?
Yes, I do.
Give me 1 second.
Mr. Calden, I realize that this is a very, very, what's the right word, lean budget.
Yes, ma'am.
Are there any, where can we cut for next year? Because I don't find this acceptable that we cannot give anybody, staff, anyone in the district, any kind of 1%, 2%, or 3% raise.
Yes, ma'am.
So from viewing the proposed budget from last year and this year, are there areas that we can really watch to be sure that we are able to give our staff a raise for next year?
So that's a really good question. We had a budget reduction committee that met in the spring semester, and through their efforts, we came up with some tools that we're utilizing this year to make sure that we could balance the budget and not propose a deficit budget for your adoption. But we're going to reconvene that group actually in a smaller subset. We're going to have a subcommittee of that group that's going to meet, and we're going to analyze staffing levels. We know that within our general fund budget, about 85% of it is made up, is payroll. There's not really another way To slice that pie, it's the overwhelming majority of our general fund expenditures. So we are going to reconvene a subcommittee of the Budget Reduction Committee, and we're going to study area by area. So we're going to study teacher rates, we're going to study auxiliary rates, we're going to study fill rates, the number of FTE personnel. We're going to go looking at our peer districts and looking at some best standards from across the state, and we're going to try to identify where we may be a little bit thicker in some areas staffing-wise than we should be, in some areas that we're leaner than we should be. So from that, through the attrition, through methods of attrition, we will look at trimming our FTE counts in the areas that we're a little bit heavier than we should be, and we'll look at realigning to some areas that we're thinner. And if we find some areas that we are just heavier overall without realigning them, through attrition, we'll look at recapturing those FTEs, which should enable us some funds that we can give staff increases.
I want to add a couple of things, Ms. Kriegel. I'm really grateful that we've been able to build in a budget that does afford those step increases, that all of those who are on that teacher, counselor, nurse pay scale will get that step increase that they are afforded annually. I'm grateful for that. But I also want to point out that there's already been a lot of good work through the use of cardonics and just our folks being really mindful of not immediately reposting positions. For example, we added, for Jimmy Ray opening, we added about 50 staff members to open up that building. And I believe the number, Ryan, that we were able to pay for, that we were able to repurpose from other areas was 17 or 18 positions?
The number 15 was in my head as you
Okay.
were talking about it, but I think it's somewhere in that area. It's somewhere around 17.
So through that good work of Mr. Calden, principals, Ms. Burkhalter and her team being very conservative about how we didn't go ahead and repost certain positions, we were able to offset that 50-person staff by that, and that was really good work.
To Dr. Hollingsworth's point, Ms. Kriegel, we are fully opening Wildman STEAM Academy next year, the expanded Wildman STEAM Academy, but it should not come with 50 additional positions like opening Jimmy Ray did. We should look at some additional positions at Jimmy Ray based off student growth. So it is a model of growth at that campus. As we're looking at the demographic reports, we might have a couple of grade levels that will need to add a teacher at Jimmy Ray going forward. That would be the easiest campus to pinpoint just because it is in a high growth area. But we will have some additional staff members at Wildman as it expands next year with its full campus. There may also be some other staffing positions across the district, but it should not be a repeat of this year as we go forward. I call that out just so that we're all playing with the same deck of cards. We do know that there will be some additional staffing requests because Wildman will be expanding. Some of those positions, if we know early enough, may come from other campuses if the numbers work out just correctly. But that it's lottery-based, it may not work out that way for us. And then the year after, we should be looking at opening Frankie Lugette, which should be very similar in terms of staffing to Jimmy Ray. And then the following year, we're now into 27. That's when we'd be looking for staffing for Waxahachie Creek. So we do have some large personnel items on our horizon as a district. So we do understand doing everything we can to try to be as efficient as possible so that we can increase staff compensation as we go.
Well, Mr. Calden, I did a survey of the functions, and it looks like the teachers and nurses in that level didn't really grow that much this year, but functions 21 and 23 did. Can you speak to that?
So teachers generally, as Dr. Hollingsworth was talking about, with our use of cardonics, there would have been some leveling out within that teacher ranks. We also did have quite a few contingencies last year that we did not carry forward in that role. 21 is instructional leadership, and so that is people who are generally over instructional areas throughout the district. So those are going to be a lot of your DLT directors, your leaders. There would also be some individuals over in TLI. As the district grows, we could see growth in those positions as well. going forward. 23, I believe, was the other one that you said, and that's school leadership. That one is going to be very natural with opening a new campus. Your principal and assistant principal are definitely going to be in school leadership. We also added some additional assistant principals at the junior high levels and to the high school level.
And those are based on numbers?
Yes, ma'am.
I guess with a $120 million budget, or how much exactly it is, it's really hard for me to be okay with us not being able to find a 2% or a 3% raise for all of our staff.
Yes, ma'am.
Because it's sad times. And I understand it is, and I understand it's the legislature also. And I understand it's that we have to pay $800,000 recapture. Is that correct?
That's our best guess right now, our best conservative guess. It should be less than that by the time the bill comes in, but right now, that's my best guess for next year.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And, you know, Ms. Kriegel, you and Mr. Memon were both very clear in June about your expectations for us to look at every way possible to give staff an increase, and I would like for you to know that we tried. We really did. We tried going through, we tried analyzing our non-discretionary, or our discretionary expenditures, our non-payroll expenditures. But like everybody else in their world, and I know it's, you know, a challenge for our staff as well, we're seeing the same cost increase, which are really shrinking our margins in terms of being able to look at some of those accounts that we have as kind of a rainy day fund within our budget for any given year. We're seeing those shrink and evaporate as well, just like everybody else is. And that's one of the big drivers that unfortunately hamstrung us this year to not be able to give an across-the-board raise.
I was going to make a comment. Is it a perfect budget? No. But I've got to commend you for making it a balanced budget.
Thank
Because
you.
I think many of us were here early that said, don't bring us a deficit budget. And I know it probably took a lot of time to figure out how to do that. But I want to thank you for not bringing us a deficit budget.
Thank you. I work with a really great staff that put in a lot of hours to get it there.
Anyone else?
Mr. Calden, are we going to put in case we do happen to get any SHARS funds or any other funding come in, that we potentially could give our teachers and, our staff some kind of little bonus later on in the year?
Yes, ma'am. It is one of the consent items tonight is the compensation plan that explicitly has a clause in it that says if additional funds are received that are otherwise unexpected or unencumbered for that purpose, that the board can authorize a mid-year increase. So we know that that's one of the stated intent of the board. So we did put that in the compensation plan this year, and that's why we're asking for your specific action on that. It would normally just be a part of the budget book, but with your action tonight before the start of the fiscal year, that would give us that ability to go back and do that.
Anyone else? Anyone in the public tonight would like to come and speak? Once, twice. Okay, this time we'll close the public hearing. Okay, board, next item will be our consent agenda. We have items A through I up for consideration.
Mr. President, I would just like to point out item E is possible action for the board to conduct a property value study audit for 21, 22, 22, 23, and 23, 24. This is a service that Linebarger, our tax attorney, offers to school districts that we've never taken advantage of before, but we're going to, in an effort specifically to be able to uncover available funds exactly to the point, Ms. Kriegel, that you were making a few minutes ago, that might give us some relief at some point during this year.
Mr. President, I move to approve the consent agenda, items A through I.
Have a motion by Mr. McCutcheon,
Second.
second by Mr. Pitts. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Motion carries 7-0. Move on to our action item. Action item A would be consideration with possible action to adopt a proposed 2024-2025 fiscal year budget for the general fund, debt service fund, and the child nutrition fund. I don't believe it requires any more explanation from Mr. Calden. If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve action item A as presented.
So moved.
So motion by Mrs. Timmerman,
Second.
second by Mr. Pitts. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion carries 6-1. Okay, action item B would be consideration with possible action to adopt the 2024-2025 maintenance and operation tax rate of .7552 and interest and sinking rate of .4129 for a total tax rate of $1.1681 per 100 in valuation. I'll entertain a motion to approve action item B as presented. Motion by Mr. Schofield,
Second.
second by Mrs. Timmerman. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Motion carries 7-0. Okay, and our last action item would be consideration with possible action to name a delegate to the Texas Association of School Boards TASB Board delegation.
Mr. President, this is something we did last year. When we have the TASB conference that takes place this year down in San Antonio toward the end of September, the board has an opportunity to nominate a delegate to attend the delegation summit that takes place at that same event. And so I would just recommend that you guys make a nomination and select a delegate to represent the board at that particular function.
How many trustees plan on attending?
I know that Mrs. Kriegel is planning to attend. I don't believe any others are planning to attend.
Anyone else? Ms. Kriegel, would you like to be our delegate for the TASB board delegation? So I need a motion to appoint Ms. Kriegel as our delegate. So
I motion
action
to
item
appoint
C
Ms.
as
Kriegel.
presented. I'm sorry?
I motion to appoint Ms. Kriegel.
Okay.
To the board delegation.
A motion by Mr. Cooper. There's a second by Mr. McCutcheon. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Motion carries 7-0. And our last item would be our motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Mrs. Timmerman. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Kriegel. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you guys very much.